Hello, ladies, gentlemen, boys and girls, and everybody else. Welcome to part 2 of C.S. Lewis's The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, read to you by yours truly. Hello. As I said yesterday, this could be your bedtime story, or you can listen to it whenever you like. This is the joy of Facebook Live. So I'm going to continue where we left off yesterday. Yesterday we read chapters 1 and chapters 2 of this story, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. And obviously we're going to carry on from chapter 3. So where we left off was... Hello, Peter. Where we left off, Lucy has just come back from Narnia. She just met Mr. Tumnus the Fawn, and she's just walked back through the wardrobe and called to her brothers and her sisters. Here we are. "I'm here," she shouted. "I'm here! I've come back! I'm all right!" Chapter 3. Edmund and the Wardrobe. Lucy ran out of the empty room into the passage and found the other three. "It's all right," she repeated. "I've come back." "What on earth are you talking about, Lucy?" asked Susan. "Why," said Lucy in amazement, "haven't you all been wondering where I was?" "So, you've been hiding, have you?" said Peter. "Poor Lou. Hiding and nobody noticed. You'll have to hide longer than that if you want people to start looking for you." "But I've been away for hours and hours," said Lucy. The others all stared at one another. "Batty!" said Edmund, tapping his head. "Quite batty!" What do you mean, Lou?" asked Peter. "What I said," answered Lucy. "It was just after breakfast when I went into the wardrobe, and I've been away for hours and hours, and I had tea, and all sorts of things have happened." "Don't be silly, Lucy," said Susan. "We've only just come out of that room a moment ago. And, well, you were there then." "No, she's not being silly. She's not being silly at all," said Peter. "She's just making up stories for fun, aren't you, Lou? And why shouldn't we?" "No, Peter, I'm not," she said. It's a magic wardrobe. There's a wood inside it, and it's snowing, and there's a fawn and a witch, and it's called Narnia. Come and see." The others didn't know what to think. But Lucy was so excited that they all went back with her into the room. She rushed ahead of them, flung open the door of the wardrobe, and cried, "Now, go in for yourselves and see." "Why, you goose," said Susan, putting her head inside and pulling the fur coats apart. "It's just an ordinary wardrobe. Look, there's the back of it." Then everyone looked in and pulled the coats apart, and there, all they saw, Lucy herself saw, a perfectly ordinary wardrobe. There was no wood, no snow, only the back of the wardrobe with hooks on it. Peter went in and rapped his knuckles on it just to make sure that it was solid. "A jolly good hoax, Lou," he said as he came out again. "You really have taken us all in. I must admit, we half believed you." "But it wasn't a hoax at all," said Lucy. "Really and truly. It was all different a moment ago. Honestly it was, I promise." "Come, Lou," said Peter. "That's going a bit far. You've had your joke. Hadn't you better drop it now?" Lucy grew very red in the face and tried to say something, though she hardly knew what she was trying to say, and burst into tears. For the next few days, she was very miserable. She could have made it up with the others quite easily at any moment, if she could have brought herself to say the whole thing was only a story made up for fun. But Lucy was a very truthful girl, and she knew that she was really in the right, and she could not bring herself to say this. The others, who thought she was telling a lie, and a silly lie too, made her feel very unhappy. The two elder ones did this without meaning to do it, but Edmund could be spiteful, and on this occasion he was spiteful. He sneered and jeered at Lucy and kept on asking her if she'd found any other new countries in other cupboards all over the house. What made it worse was that these days ought to have been delightful. The weather was fine and they were out of doors from morning till night, bathing, fishing, climbing trees, and lying in the heather. But Lucy could not properly enjoy any of it. And so things went on until the next wet day. That day, when it came to the afternoon, and there was still no sign of a break in the weather, they decided to play hide and seek. Susan was it, and as soon as all the others scattered to hide, Lucy went to the room where the wardrobe was. She did not mean to hide in the wardrobe, because she knew that would only set the others talking again about the whole wretched business. But she did want to have one more look inside it. for by this time she was beginning to wonder herself whether Narnia and the fawn had not been a dream. The house was so large and complicated and full of hiding places that she thought she would have time to have one more look in the wardrobe and then hide somewhere else. But as soon as she reached it, she heard steps in the passage outside. And then there was nothing for it but to jump into the wardrobe and hold the door closed behind her. She did not shut it properly, because she knew that it's very silly to shut oneself into a wardrobe. If we've learnt nothing, we've learnt that. Don't shut yourselves in wardrobes, even if it is a magic one. Now, the steps she'd heard were those of Edmund, and he came into the room just in time to see Lucy vanishing into the wardrobe. He at once decided to get himself into it. Not because he thought it was a particularly good place to hide, but because he wanted to go on teasing her about her imaginary country. He opened the door. There were the coats hanging up as usual, and a smell of mothballs, and darkness, and silence, and no sign of Lucy. She thinks I'm Susan, come to catch her, said Edmund to himself. And so she's keeping very quiet at the back. He jumped in and shut the door, forgetting what a very foolish thing this is to do. Then he began feeling about for Lucy in the dark. And we've got a picture of Edmund in the wardrobe. Here we are. Lucy! Hello! Now, he had expected to find her in a few seconds, and was very surprised when he did not. He decided to open the door again and let in some light. But he couldn't find the door either. He didn't like this at all, and began groping wildly in every direction. He even shouted out, "Lucy! Lou! Where are you? I know you're here!" There was no answer, and Edmund noticed that his own voice had a curious sound. Not the sound you expect in a cupboard, but a kind of open-air sound. He also noticed that he was unexpectedly cold, and then he saw a light. "Oh, thank goodness," said Edmund. "The door must have swung open of its own accord." He forgot all about Lucy and went towards the light, which he thought was the open door of the wardrobe. But instead of finding himself stepping out into the spare room, he found himself stepping out from the shadows of some thick, dark fir trees into an open place in the middle of a wood. Here we go. There was a crisp, dry snow under his feet, and more snow lying on the branches of the trees. Overhead there was a pale blue sky, the sort of sky one sees on a fine winter day in the morning. Straight ahead of him, he saw between the tree trunks the sun, just rising, very red and clear. Everything was perfectly still, as if he were the only living creature in that country. There was not even a robin or a squirrel amongst the trees, and the wood stretched as far as he could see in every direction. He shivered. He now remembered that he'd been looking for Lucy, and also how unpleasant he'd been to her about her imaginary country, which now turned out not to have been imaginary at all. He thought that she must be somewhere quite close, and so he shouted, "Lucy! Lucy! I'm here too! Edmund!" There was no answer. She's angry about all the things I've been saying lately, thought Edmund. And though he did not like to admit that he'd been wrong, he also didn't much like being alone in this strange, cold, quiet place, so he shouted again, "I say, Lou! I'm sorry I didn't believe you. I see now you were right all along. Do come out! Make it Pax!" Which means make peace. Still, there was no answer. "Just like a girl," said Edmund to himself, "sulking somewhere and won't accept an apology." He looked round him again and decided he didn't much like this place, and had almost made up his mind to go home, when he heard, very far off in the wood, a sound of bells. He listened, and the sound came nearer and nearer, and at last there swept into sight a sledge, drawn by 2 reindeer. The reindeer were about the size of Shetland ponies, and their hair was so white that even the snow hardly looked white compared with them. Their branching horns were gilded and shone like something on fire when the sunrise caught them. Their harness was of scarlet leather and covered with bells. On the sledge, driving the reindeer, sat a fat dwarf, who would have been about 3 feet high if he'd been standing. He was dressed in polar bear's fur, and on his head he wore a red hood with a long gold tassel hanging down from its point. His huge beard covered his knees and served him instead of a rug. But behind him, on a much higher seat in the middle of the sledge, sat a very different person, a great lady, taller than any woman that Edmund had ever seen. She also was covered in white fur up to her throat, and held a long straight golden wand in her right hand, and wore a golden crown on her head. Her face was white, not merely pale, but white like snow, or paper, or icing sugar, except for her very red mouth. It was a beautiful face in other respects, but proud and cold and stern. The sledge was a fine sight as it came sweeping towards Edmund, with the bells jingling and the dwarf cracking his whip and the snow flying up on either side of it. "Stop!" said the lady, and the dwarf pulled the reindeer up so sharply that they almost sat down. Then they recovered themselves and stood champing their bits and blowing. In the frosty air, the breath coming out of their nostrils looked like smoke. Or the picture as well. Here we are. There you go. "And what, pray, are you?" said the lady, looking hard at Edmund. My name's Edmund," said Edmund, rather awkwardly. He did not like the way she looked at him. The lady frowned. "Is that how you address a queen?" she asked, looking sterner than ever. "I beg your pardon, your majesty. I didn't know," said Edmund. "Not know the Queen of Narnia?" cried she. "Ha! You shall know us better hereafter. But I repeat, what are you?" "Please, your majesty," said Edmund, "I don't know what you mean. I'm at school. Or at least I was. It's the holidays now." Chapter 4. Turkish Delight. If you guys like Turkish Delight, this chapter's for you. If not, just imagine he's eating something else, like fruit pastels or Maltesers. Anyway, bear with me. "But what are you?" said the queen again. "Are you a great overgrown dwarf that has cut off his beard?" No, your majesty," said Edmund. "I never had a beard. I'm a boy." "A boy?" said she. "Do you mean you are a son of Adam?" Edmund stood still, saying nothing. He was too confused by this time to understand what the question meant. "I see you are an idiot, whatever else you may be," said the queen. "Answer me once and for all, or I shall lose my patience. Are you human?" "Yes, your majesty," said Edmund. "And how, pray, did you come to enter my dominion?" "Please, your majesty, I came in through the wardrobe." "A wardrobe? What do you mean?" I opened a door and just found myself here, your majesty," said Edmund. "Ha!" said the queen, more to herself than to him. A door from the world of men? I have heard of such things. This may wreck all, but he is only one, and he is easily dealt with." As she spoke these words, she rose from her seat and looked at Edmund full in the face, her eyes flaming. At the same moment, she raised her wand. Edmund felt sure she was going to do something dreadful, but he seemed unable to move. Then, just as he gave himself up for gone, for lost, she appeared to change her mind. "My poor child," she said in quite a different voice, "how cold you look. Come and sit with me. Sit on the sledge, and I'll put my mantle round you, and we will talk." Edmund didn't like this arrangement at all, but he dare not disobey. He stepped up onto the sledge and sat at her feet, and she put a fold of her fur mantle round him and tucked it well in. "Perhaps something hot to drink?" said the queen. "Should you like that?" "Yes, please, your majesty," said Edmund. His teeth were chattering. The queen took from somewhere among her wrappings a very small bottle, which looked as if it was made of copper. Then, holding out her arm, she let one drop fall onto the snow beside the sledge. Edmund saw the drop for a second in midair, shining like a diamond. But the moment it touched the snow, there was a hissing sound, and there stood a jewelled cup full of something that steamed. The dwarf immediately took this and handed it to Edmund with a bow and smile. Not a very nice smile. Something like that. Edmund felt much better as he began to sip the hot drink. It was something he had never tasted before, very sweet and foamy and creamy, and it warmed him right down to his toes. "It is dull, son of Adam, to drink without eating," said the Queen presently. "What would you like best to eat?" "Turkish delight, please, your Majesty," said Edmund. The Queen let another drop fall from the bottle to the snow, and instantly there appeared a round box tied with green silk ribbon, which, when opened, turned out to contain several pounds of the best Turkish delight. Sorry, I can't stand this stuff. Each piece was sweet and light to the very centre, and Edmund had never tasted anything more delicious. He was quite warm now and very comfortable. While he was eating, the Queen kept asking him questions. At first, Edmund tried to remember that it is rude to speak with one's mouth full. Speaking of which, cheers. But soon he forgot about this, and thought of only trying to shovel down as much Turkish delight as he possibly could. And the more he ate, the more he wanted to eat. And he never asked himself why the Queen should be so inquisitive. I don't even like Turkish delight that much. She got him to tell her that he had one brother and two sisters, and that one of his sisters had already been in Narnia and met a faun, and that no one except himself and his brother and his sisters knew anything about Narnia. She seemed especially interested in the fact that there were 4 of them, and kept on coming back to it. "You are sure there are just 4 of you?" she asked. "2 sons of Adam and 2 daughters of Eve, neither more nor less?" And Edmund, with his mouth full of Turkish delight, kept on saying, "You know, I've told you that before." And he kept forgetting to call her Your Majesty, but she didn't seem to mind that now. At last, the Turkish delight was all finished, and Edmund was looking very hard at the empty box and wishing that she would ask him whether he would like some more. Probably the Queen knew quite well what he was thinking, for she knew, though Edmund did not, that this was enchanted in Turkish delight, and that anyone who had once tasted it would want more and more of it, and would, even if they were allowed, go on eating until they killed themselves. Anyway, instead, she said to him, "Son of Adam, I should so much like to see your brother and your 2 sisters. Will you bring them to see me?" "I'll try," said Edmund, still looking at the empty box. "Oh, because if you did come again, bringing them with you, of course, I'll be able to give you some more Turkish delight. I can't do it now. The magic will only work once. In my own house, it will be another matter." "Well, why can't we go to your house now?" said Edmund. When he first got onto the sledge, he'd been afraid that she might drive away with him in it to some unknown place from which he would not be able to get back. But he'd forgotten about that fear now. "It is a lovely place, my house," said the Queen. "I am sure that you would like it. There are whole rooms full of Turkish delight, and what's more, I have no children of my own. I want a nice boy whom I can bring up as a prince, and who would be king of Narnia when I am gone. While he was prince, he would wear a golden crown and eat Turkish delight all day long. And you are much the cleverest and handsome young man I've ever met. I think I would like to make you the prince some day, when you bring the others to visit me." "Why not now?" said Edmund. His face had become very red, and his mouth and fingers were sticky. He didn't look either clever or handsome, whatever the Queen might say. "Oh, but if I took you there now," said she, "I shouldn't see your brother and your sisters. I very much want to know your charming relations. You are to be the prince, and, later on, the king. That is understood. But you must have courtiers and nobles. I shall make your brother a duke, and your sisters duchesses." "Well, there's nothing special about them," said Edmund. "And anyway, I can always bring them another time." "Ah, but once you were in my house," said the Queen, "you might forget all about them. You would be enjoying yourself so much that you wouldn't want to bother going to fetch them for me. No, you must come back to your own country. You must go back, to your own country now, and come to me another day." I've lost my place. Bear with me. "Come to me another day. With them. You understand? It's no good coming without them." "But I don't even know the way back to my own country," pleaded Edmund. "That's easy," answered the Queen. Do you see that lamp? She pointed with her wand, and Edmund turned and saw the same lamppost under which Lucy had met the fawn. Straight on beyond that is the way to the world of men. And now, look the other way. Here she pointed in the opposite direction, and tell me if you can see those two hills rising above the trees. I think I can, said Edmund. Well, my house is in between those two hills. Yes, so next time you come, you only have to find the lamppost and look for the two hills and walk through the wood till you reach my house. But remember, you must bring the others with you. I might have to be very angry with you if you come alone. I'll do my best, said Edmund. And by the way, said the Queen, you needn't tell them about me. Siren. It's all gone. You needn't tell them about me. It'll be fun to keep it a secret between the two of us, wouldn't it? Make it a surprise for them. Just bring them along to the two hills. A clever boy like you will easily think of some excuse for doing that. And when you come to my house, you could just say, let's see who lives here, or something like that. I'm sure that would be best. If your sister has met one of the fawns, she may have heard strange stories about me. Nasty stories that might make her afraid to come to me. Fawns will say anything, you know. And now, please, said Edmund suddenly. Please, can I have just one more piece of Turkish delight to eat on the way home? Please? No, said the Queen with a laugh. You must wait until next time. While she spoke, she signalled to the dwarf to drive on. But as the sledge swept away out of sight, the Queen waved to Edmund, calling out, Next time, don't forget, come soon. Edmund was still staring after the sledge when he heard someone calling his own name, and looking round he saw Lucy coming towards him from another part of the wood. Oh, Edmund, she cried, so you've got in too. Oh, it's wonderful. And now... All right, said Edmund. So, hang on, wait a minute. I see you're right, and it is a magic wardrobe after all. I'll say I'm sorry if you like. But where on earth have you been all this time? I've been looking for you everywhere. Oh, if I'd known you got in too, I would have waited for you, said Lucy, who was too happy and too excited to notice how snappishly Edmund had spoken or how flushed and strange his face was. I've been having lunch with dear Mr. Tumnus, the fawn, and he's very well, and the White Witch has done nothing to him for letting me go, so he thinks she can't have found out. And perhaps everything's going to be all right after all. The White Witch, said Edmund. Who's she? She's a perfectly terrible person, said Lucy. She calls herself the Queen of Narnia, though she has no right to be the Queen at all. And all the fauns, and the dryads, and the naiads, and the dwarves, and animals, at least all the good ones, they simply hate her. And she can turn people into stone, and do all kinds of horrible things. And she's made a magic so that it's always winter in Narnia. Always winter, but it never gets to Christmas. And she drives around on a sledge drawn by reindeer with her wand in her hand and a crown on her head. Edmund was already feeling uncomfortable from having eaten too many sweeties. And when he heard that the lady he had made friends with was a dangerous witch, he felt even more uncomfortable. But still, he wanted to taste that Turkish delight again. Oh, more than he wanted anything else. Who told you all that stuff about the White Witch? He asked. Mr. Tumnus the fawn, said Lucy. Oh, you can't always believe what fawns say, said Edmund, trying to sound as if he knew far more about them than Lucy did. Who says so? Said Lucy. Everyone knows it, said Edmund. Ask anybody you like. But it's pretty poor sport standing here in the snow. Let's go home. Oh, yes, said Lucy. Oh, Edmund, I'm glad you've got in too. The others will have to believe me that Narnia exists now and that we've both been here. What fun it will be! But Edmund, he secretly thought that it would not be as good fun for him as for her. He would have to admit to them that Lucy had been right all along, before all of the others. And he felt sure the others would all be on the side of the fawns and the animals, but he was already more than half on the side of the witch. He didn't know what he would say, or how he would keep it secret once they were all talking about Narnia. By this time they'd walked a good way. Then suddenly They felt coats around them instead of branches, and the next moment they were both standing outside the wardrobe in the empty room. "I say," said Lucy, "you do look awful, Edmund. Don't you feel well?" "I'm all right," said Edmund. But this was not true. He was feeling very sick. And that's what happens when you eat too many sweeties. "Come on then," said Lucy. "Let's find the others. What a lot of adventures we shall have now that we're all in it together." And that is the end of the chapter. What shall happen on next week's episode, or tomorrow's episode? Will the others believe Lucy and Edmund? Is Narnia true? Or have they just been eating too many bedtime sweets? Anyway, let's find out tomorrow. Why is everyone watching now? No. We're all finished. Come back tomorrow evening at 5:30 to see what happens. Chapter 5, chapter 6 tomorrow. It's a good story, isn't it? I quite enjoy it. I hope you're enjoying it too. I'll see you then. Have a good night. God bless you. Be well. Bye-bye.